From Classic in 2019 where Paladins were Alliance only, to TBC where they were boosting machines, to Wrath of the Lich King where most raid groups want multiple Paladins, fill in all 3 specs for the buffs they bring: a ridiculously strong raid cooldown, tanks with an extra life, or healers which are relied on to keep your tank stable with their monstrous amounts of mana. You probably think it can't get any better. Well, roll on Cataclysm. Cataclysm will build on all 3 specs, separating some of their utility between the 3, making all 3 specs even more interesting to play than they are now, and really turns that face roll Retribution spec into possibly one of the harder specs to master, but extremely rewarding if you do so. This is the first video series of many over the next few months to get everyone ready for when cata inevitably launches, and whilst we will dive into all the specifics and deep dive lots of detail in later videos, today we're going to have a look at what I consider the top 10 changes you need to know about for Paladins in Cataclysm. Starting firstly with the Holy Power system. Holy Power is a brand new resource system for Paladins. You could compare it to combo points for Rogues and Feral Druids as an example, but you only get 3 instead of 5. There's different ways to build it across the 3 different specs, and even PvP specs have extra ways of giving you Holy Power. Once you build them, you then spend them on your big abilities. This could be on Shield of the Righteousness for protection, which increases its damage the more Holy Power that you use with it. Or you could use it on Light of Dawn as a Holy Paladin, where it consumes all Holy Power to send a wave of healing energy before you, healing up to 4 of the most injured targets in your party or raid within a 30-yard frontal cone. Of course, the amount is heal scales with spell power, so I just dropped off my weapon to show you that it's gone down to 1.8k per charge now. This, out of all of the abilities, probably looks the best. For Retribution, you'll be using yours on Templar's Verdict, which is an instant weapon attack that causes a percentage of weapon damage, consumes all charges of Holy Power to increase the damage dealt. So with 1 Holy Power, it's only 39% weapon damage, with 2 Holy Power 117%, and with 3, 306%. So it goes without saying, you're always going to want to use Templar's Verdict with 3 Holy Power. You also have Word of Glory that can be used across all 3 specs, where it just consumes all your Holy Power to heal a friendly target, or yourself of course, for 5.6k per charge, again scaling with your spell power. Each spec builds Holy Power in different ways. For a Holy Paladin, it's either with Holy Shock. Holy Shock's got a 6-second cooldown, so you'll get 1 Holy Power per 6 seconds as long as you're using this on cooldown. There are also procs, which allow you to use 2 charges of Holy Shock. But even as a Holy Paladin, you have Crusader Strike, so if you're up in melee range, you can actually Crusader Strike and Holy Shock to build those Holy Powers up quicker, so you can then use free heals. Because anything that costs Holy Power, such as Word of Glory or Light of Dawn, don't cost mana. Beacon of Light has been reworked as well, which we'll actually get to later on in the video, but if you use your big heal, which is Divine Light, on a target that's got Beacon, that also generates a Holy Power, which basically you're trading 50% of a heal, because when you heal someone with Divine Light, it only heals the tank for 50% of that, but instead of that extra bit of healing, you're going to get a Holy Power instead. Retribution is as you would expect. You build it with Crusader Strikes, but you can also build it with Divine Storm. But it's worth mentioning Divine Storm does share a cooldown with Crusader Strike now, and for you to gain Holy Power, you need to hit at least 4 targets with a Divine Storm to actually gain any Holy Power at all. There are things like Zealotry, which is your big cooldown for Retribution, where every time you Crusader Strike, it instantly gives you 3 charges of Holy Power, but this is on a 2-minute cooldown and only lasts 20 seconds. Protection, as you'll expect, will gain Holy Power from things like Hammer of the Righteous. You can get Holy Power as a prop Paladin from things like Divine Plea as well. Where Talented, you get 3 Holy Powers instantly, which is always nice, but it is on a 2-minute cooldown. You do get a nice big proc called Grand Crusader though, where your next Avenger's Shield will generate Holy Power. What this basically does is when your Crusader Strike or Hammer of the Righteousness deal damage to your primary target, there's a 20% chance of refreshing the cooldown on your Avenger's Shield, and it causes it to generate a Holy Power. So it's needless to say, there's lots of ways of gaining Holy Power, and the one that I mentioned earlier, which is available to all 3 specs, is Pursuit of Justice, where you have a 100% chance to gain a charge of Holy Power when struck by a stun, fear, or immobilize effect. That was right at the start of the video where I was talking about certain PvP talents even giving you Holy Power. Although, when it gives you 15% movement speed, it's kind of hard to call it a PvP talent, I guess. The next one that would make my top 10 is Retribution as a whole, because it's got the addition of Inquisition, where it gives you extra holy damage, and it's a buff that you need to maintain for pretty much 100% of the time. And the spec as a whole feels like you're spinning a lot of plates. You need to know when to AoE, so when to use Divine Storm over Crusader Strike, when to use Consecrate because of the immense amount of mana that it costs. Actually having several abilities that are part of a priority system now, and spinning those plates with things like Inquisition and your holy power, it just makes for a really, really engaging spec that definitely takes a long time to master, because you're still getting Art of War procs where you get instant exorcisms. You're getting Divine Purpose procs where things like Judgment, Exorcism, Templar's Verdict, just basically all your main Retribution abilities have a 7% chance to allow your next Holy Power ability to consume no Holy Power and cast as if it was used with 3. So this is where you can use things like Zealotry to very quickly put your cooldowns up if you're lucky enough to run straight in at the beginning of a fight and get one of those procs of Divine Purpose. Exorcism moves really far up on this priority list because it's an extremely hard-hitting ability, and no longer worrying too much about Seal of Command as an example either, because Seal of Command is no more. You only have 2 seals. You either use Seal of Truth or Seal of Righteousness, and in most cases Seal of Truth wins out. Seal of Righteousness is just for extremely heavy AoE, but Seals of Command as a talent actually benefits both anyway, because it gives your Seal of Righteousness and Seal of Truth and Seal of Justice, which you'd rarely use outside of PvP, but they all deal 7% weapon damage when triggered. In addition, your Seal of Righteousness now hits all enemy targets within melee range. That's what basically turns Seal of Righteousness into an AoE ability. But Ret really is a lot of fun, and it is one of the specs that's had the most radical changes in my opinion, because it's gone from something where you mash any buttons and do reasonable damage to, if you play it right, it's an absolute monster. The next real big change affects all specs, and that's having a really, really cool cooldown, not only aesthetically, but actually in terms of its utility for each of the 3 specs, which is Guardian of the Ancient Kings. Now, for protection, for example, it is quite literally a 50% damage reduction cooldown for 12 seconds. When you pull him out, he's just stood there and he is just reducing your incoming damage by 50%. For Holy, he sticks around for 30 seconds, and while he's active, your next 5 direct heals will cause the Guardian to heal the same target for the amount healed by you, and friendly targets within 10 yards for 10% of the amount healed. So not only does he duplicate the healing that you're doing on the target that you're doing it to, it's also going to do a bit of splash healing as well for 10% of that amount. And for Retribution, he sticks around for a whopping 30 seconds, and while active, yours and your Guardian's attacks cause you to be infused with Ancient Power, increasing your strength by 1% per application. After 30 seconds, or when the Guardian is killed, you'll release Ancient Fury, causing 628 damage plus 628 per application of Ancient Power, divided among all targets within 10 yards. So not only is it an amazing strength buff that you want to use with all of your other cooldowns, it's got that extra little bang just to finish it off. Coming in at number 4 would have to be Holy, just Holy as a spec overall. The days of just spamming Holy Light and just trying to get melee swings in on the boss have gone. It's a far more methodical, well thought out spec to play. You have to be thinking ahead all the time, knowing the damage that's going to be coming in and making sure you've got the Holy Power for the right situation, whether that's going to be a big tank hill with a Word of Glory, or banging out a Light of Dawn and having a plan to very quickly get back to 3 Holy Powers again to do the same thing again, because you do have one extra way that I didn't mention earlier of gaining extra Holy Power, and that's with Holy Radiance. So Paladins now have this heal, which imbues a friendly target with Radiant Energy, healing that target and all allies within 10 yards, for let's say 5.1k with the gear I'm using at the moment, and another 899 every 0.89 seconds for another few seconds, and it also grants a Holy Power. The healing effectiveness diminishes for each player target beyond 6, but because this is a really reliable way of getting Holy Power and keeping AoE heals going out, it's very easy to get in melee range, making sure that you're using this, mixing in Holy Shock when it's ready, Crusader Strike when it's ready, then using Light of Dawn, so you can just keep the AoE heals going out for as long as possible, whilst also trying to minimize the amount you're using Holy Radiance by mixing in those Holy Shocks and Crusader Strikes. Because trust me, you will go very quick if all you're trying to do is pump out big HPS. But Holy overall is a really fun spec that you definitely will not be disappointed with if you're a Holy Paladin now in Wrath. We've got a few quick ones now, but number 5 would be DSAC. Now, when I say these are top changes, I don't mean they're things that I absolutely love. I just mean they're the top things that are really important to know. So DSAC is so deep in the protection tree that it will only be Protection Paladins that will be able to bring it. It still acts fairly the same. There's no need to cancel or a macro or anything like that anymore because it is just Divine Guardian rather than it being Divine Sacrifice, which is improved by Divine Guardian. Now it's just Divine Guardian. And it was changed so all party and raid members within 30 yards, excluding the Paladin, take 20% reduced damage. So it's worth noting that it cannot be used as a personal cooldown anymore. This actually gives some spec identity rather than class identity because Holy is the only spec of Paladin that will be able to bring Aura Mastery now as well. So there will be no Retribution Paladins being required to bring DSAC over AM or AM over DSAC because actually it's only your healer that brings Aura Mastery and only your Protection Paladin that brings Divine Guardian. Unfortunately, outside of general utility with things like Hand of Sacrifice or Hand of Salvation, there's nothing really that a Retribution brings that is raid-wide. Another quick one coming in at number 6 would be Blessings and how they've been completely redesigned. There's a lot of homogenization across the board when it comes to buffs and debuffs, and you can see using this add-on just here, the amount of different buffs that just my spec as a Paladin can bring. And that's mainly because of things like Blessing of Might and how that's changed, where now it increases melee attack power by 20%, ranged attack power by 10%, and it gives you the effect of Blessing of Wisdom as well. So it's basically Blessing of Wisdom and Blessing of Might all rolled into one. And the same with Blessing of Kings, where it increases strength, agility, stamina, and all of that by 5% and gives you the resistances, but this will be exactly the same as Mark of the Wild for a druid. All other blessings have gone. Even if you was to look at protection, Blessing of Sanctuary is just a passive talent now, and it's not actually something that needs to be buffed. But you will find more and more of these changes as we go through all of these class videos, particularly the ones after these top 10 videos, where we're actually diving into the real specifics of all the talents and all the abilities. Coming in at number 7, which I've already touched on briefly, but most of the seals have been stripped away as well. So there's no Seal of Light, Seal of Wisdom anymore. Instead, there's just Seal of Insight, which gives each single target melee attack a chance to heal the Paladin and restore mana. So it does both at the same time. The same way Seal of Truth does a very similar thing to what is always done and what you'll be used to, and Seal of Righteousness as a Rep Paladin will become Seal of Command in a sense. Because whilst it's only single target for me at the moment as a Holy Paladin, for a Retribution Paladin, it would hit multiple targets. Seal of Justice is the only other one in there, and I'll be honest with you, as someone who doesn't really PvP that much, I rarely ever put this on. But what it actually does is limits the maximum run speed by 5 seconds and deals 103 additional Holy damage. But really, Holy Paladins use Seal of Insight, Rep Paladins use Seal of Truth 90% of the time, as the Protection Paladins 100% of the time. Coming in at number 8, again, a minor one, but really, really useful for everybody to know. Every spec of Paladin now has an interrupt. It's on a 10-second cooldown, it locks them out of that school for 4 seconds, and I absolutely love it. As a Holy Paladin who spends all my time in melee, or as much time in melee as I can, so I can always get those free Holy Powers from Crusader Strike, and be hitting the boss so I can get mana back, being able to be part of an interrupt rotation, just getting that extra bit of responsibility, is always a nice thing. And it also means when you're creating your groups, if you become a 10-man guild in Cataclysm, for example, you can be less strict on which classes you bring because you know whatever spec Paladin you've got, whether it's Prot, Ret, or Holy, is actually going to be able to interrupt now. And in at number 9 is really along the same vein, where it's Crusader Strike. Now, Crusader Strike, as any Paladin that you've played so far, you will only associate it with a Rep Paladin, whereas it is now useful for all 3 specs. As we discussed earlier, for Protection Paladins, it gives you a chance of being able to get a free Avenger Shield, which also gives a Holy Power. For Holy Paladins, you get free Holy Power, which equates to free healing. And for Retribution Paladins, it's like your bread and butter filler single target ability. Whilst outside of just what you're going to use it for, there's not that much to talk about. It's just nice to have more in your toolkit. And even, as I say, as a Holy Paladin, having something else to press when you stood there and actually get a benefit from it is great to see. And for number 10 would be auras. Whilst auras have not changed massively, they've certainly shrunk, and the main reason for that is resistance aura. So you've still got Devotion aura, which increases armor, you've still got Retribution aura, which causes holy damage to enemies that strike you while you've got Retribution Aura active, and you've still got Concentration Aura, which reduces that pushback. And of course, you've got Crusader Aura as well to increase mount speed. But Resistance Aura now gives 195 additional fire, frost, and shadow resistance to all party and raid members within 40 yards. So this does just make assigning of auras so much easier, because there is no improvement to auras from talents. So you don't want, for example, a Retribution Paladin with improved Ret Aura, because it don't exist, the same way you wouldn't have a Protection Paladin with improved Devotion Aura, because it doesn't exist. So it just makes it a lot easier to go, you're assigned to Dev, you're assigned to Ret, you're assigned to Resistances. So in a 25-man raid where you've got multiple Paladins, there's no shifting around on a boss-by-boss basis. In the coming months, I will be breaking down not only just Paladins, but all of these specs in far greater detail, looking at all the minor changes to glyphs, to talents, to how they play, and to how you gear. So be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of that, because it's just going to be tons and tons of information, and that's why I've started early. If you're watching and you're like, why are you talking about Cataclysm? I feel like I've already left it too late because I've got about 300 videos to get through. And also, if you did sit through the whole video and wondered why multiple times you've seen me wearing sunglasses indoors, it's mainly to cover a black eye. No, I didn't get slapped. I got beat up by the floor after far too many gin and tonics. See you on the next one.